The Legend of the Sacred Drum. Long ago, in a village called Tafi, there lived a boy named Kofi. He was small but brave. Kofi loved listening to the stories told by the elders. One story that always excited him was the legend of the sacred drum. The drum was said to have magical powers that could protect the village from danger. But no one knew where the drum was hidden. It had been lost for many years. One evening, Kofi sat with his friends by the big baobab tree. His grandmother, Mame Akua, came to tell them the story again. The sacred drum was once used by our ancestors, she said. It was given to us by the spirits of the forest. Whenever the drum was beaten, it called the warriors of the land, and they would fight any enemy that came near. Kofi's eyes grew wide. "Where is the drum now, Grandma?" he asked. Mame Akua sighed. "The drum was stolen many years ago by a wicked king from a faraway land. Some say it is hidden deep in the dark forest. But many have gone to search for it, and none have returned." That night, Kofi could not sleep. He kept thinking about the drum. He knew his village needed it, especially now. Strange things had been happening. Crops were failing, and the animals in the forest were disappearing. The villagers were worried. "I will find the sacred drum," Kofi whispered to himself. The next morning, he packed a small bag with food and water. He told his parents about his plan, but they laughed. "You are too young, Kofi," his father said. "The forest is dangerous." But Kofi was determined. He knew he had to try. Into the forest. Kofi started his journey at sunrise. The forest was thick and dark. The trees were tall, and their branches blocked the sunlight. Kofi could hear strange sounds, birds chirping, leaves rustling, and animals growling in the distance. After walking for hours, Kofi came across an old man sitting by a small stream. The man had white hair and a long beard. He was carving something from wood. "Hello, old man," Kofi greeted him. "I am looking for the sacred drum. Do you know where it is?" The old man smiled but did not answer. Instead, he pointed to a narrow path leading deeper into the forest. "Follow that path," he said. "But be careful. The drum is protected by powerful magic." The 3 tests. As Kofi followed the path, he felt the air grow colder. Suddenly, a large river appeared in front of him. The water was deep and fast. There was no bridge to cross it. Kofi sat down and thought hard. Then, he remembered the old man's words. "The drum is protected by magic," he said to himself. Just then, he noticed a large leaf floating on the water. It looked strong enough to carry him. Kofi stepped onto the leaf, and to his surprise, it floated across the river, carrying him safely to the other side. Next, Kofi came to a field of tall grass. As he walked through the grass, he heard whispers. "Turn back, young one," the voices said. "You will never find the drum." But Kofi did not listen. He walked faster. Suddenly, a giant snake appeared in front of him. It was the biggest snake he had ever seen. The snake hissed and moved closer, ready to strike. Kofi froze in fear. But then, he remembered the story his grandmother had told him about the sacred drum. "The drum gives strength to the brave," she had said. Kofi took a deep breath and stared at the snake. "I am not afraid of you," he shouted. To his surprise, the snake disappeared. Kofi realized it had been an illusion, another test of his courage. The hidden cave. Kofi continued walking until he reached a mountain. At the base of the mountain, he saw a large cave. He knew the drum must be inside. But as he entered the cave, he felt the ground shake. Rocks began to fall from the ceiling. Kofi ran deeper into the cave, dodging the falling rocks. At the far end of the cave, he saw a glowing object. It was the sacred drum. It was bigger than he had imagined, and it was covered in beautiful carvings. Kofi's heart raced with excitement. But just as he reached for the drum, a voice echoed through the cave. "Who dares to take the sacred drum?" the voice boomed. Kofi turned around and saw a tall figure dressed in a long robe. The figure's face was hidden in the shadows. "I am Kofi from Kita village," Kofi said. "I have come to take the drum and protect my people." The figure stepped closer. It was the guardian of the drum. "Many have tried to take the drum," the guardian said. "But only the worthy can have it. To prove yourself, you must answer my question." Kofi's heart pounded. He knew this was his final test. The guardian looked at Kofi and asked, "What is the greatest strength a warrior can have?" Kofi thought for a moment. "Is it bravery?" he asked. The guardian shook his head. "No." "Is it power?" "No." Kofi closed his eyes and thought about all he had learned on his journey. Then, he opened his eyes and said, "The greatest strength is wisdom. A true warrior uses his mind, not just his muscles." The guardian smiled. "You are wise, young Kofi. The drum is yours." Kofi carefully picked up the drum. It was surprisingly light. As he walked out of the cave, the sun began to rise. He felt stronger and more confident than ever before. On his way back to the village, Kofi used the drum to protect himself. When wild animals appeared, he beat the drum, and they ran away. When a storm threatened, he beat the drum, and the rain stopped. When Kofi finally returned to Kita, the villagers were amazed. They had heard the sound of the drum and knew Kofi had succeeded. The village held a big celebration in Kofi's honor. The chiefs and elders gathered around the fire as Kofi told them about his journey. They praised him for his bravery and wisdom. Kofi's parents were proud, and Mame Akua smiled as she listened to her grandson's story. "You have done well, Kofi," she said. "The spirits of our ancestors are pleased." From that day on, the sacred drum was kept safe in the village. Whenever danger came, Kofi would beat the drum, and the village would be protected. Kofi grew up to be a wise and respected leader, just like the warriors in the stories he had always loved. And so, the legend of the sacred drum lived on, passed down from generation to generation, reminding the people of Kita that true strength comes from within. As the days passed, the village of Tafi began to thrive once again. The crops that had once withered now grew tall and green. The animals returned to the forests, and the river, once dry, flowed with fresh, clear water. The villagers believed that the sacred drum had brought them blessings. Kofi became a hero in the village. Children gathered around him every evening, eager to hear his stories. He shared the lessons he had learned from his journey, teaching them about bravery, wisdom, and the power of believing in yourself. But Kofi knew that the drum's magic was not to be used lightly. He only beat the drum when it was truly necessary, for he remembered the guardian's words, "The drum is for the worthy, not the selfish." A new threat. One quiet afternoon, as Kofi sat by the river with his friends, a group of strangers arrived in the village. They were dressed in fine clothes and carried shiny weapons. Their leader was a tall man with a scar across his face. "We are travelers from the far kingdom of Enloga," the leader said. "We have heard of the sacred drum and its power. We wish to buy it from you." The villagers were shocked. No one had ever dared to ask for the drum. It was a sacred object, not something to be sold. "The drum is not for sale," Kofi said firmly. "It belongs to the people of Tafi." The leader's eyes narrowed. "You are just a boy," he said. "What do you know about such things? We will pay you a fortune for the drum. Your village will be rich." But Kofi stood his ground. "Our village does not need riches. The drum is our protector. It cannot be bought with gold." Angered by Kofi's refusal, the leader of the strangers left, but his words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Kofi knew they would return, and this time, they would not ask politely. Preparing for battle. That night, Kofi gathered the village elders. The strangers will come back, and they will try to take the drum by force, he warned. The chief of the village, Nana Owusu, nodded solemnly. You are right, Kofi. We must prepare to defend ourselves. The village warriors began sharpening their spears and practicing their skills. The women and children prepared food and gathered supplies. Kofi knew that the sacred drum would play a key role in the battle ahead, but he also knew that he had to use it wisely. Remember, Mame Akua told him, the drum's magic is powerful, but it must be used with a pure heart. Do not let anger guide your hand. Just as Kofi had predicted, the strangers returned, but this time, they came under the cover of darkness. Kofi was awake, keeping watch from a hill above the village. He saw the glimmer of their weapons in the moonlight and heard their whispered commands. Kofi quickly ran down to the village and sounded the alarm. The villagers were ready. The warriors took their positions, hiding behind trees and huts, while the women and children stayed safely in their homes. The leader of the strangers approached the center of the village. Give us the drum, he shouted. Or we will destroy your village. Kofi stepped forward, holding the sacred drum. You will not take what is not yours, he said, his voice calm but firm. The leader laughed. You think you can stop us, boy? Without another word, the strangers charged. The battle began. As the strangers stormed the village, Kofi raised the sacred drum and began to beat it. The sound echoed through the night, loud and powerful. With each beat, the ground trembled, and the air seemed to hum with energy. The village warriors, inspired by the sound of the drum, fought with incredible strength and speed. The strangers were caught off guard. Every time they tried to strike, it was as if an invisible force blocked their attacks. Suddenly, the leader of the strangers stumbled back. His men were losing the fight, and he knew he could not win. Retreat, he shouted, and the strangers fled into the night, defeated. The villagers cheered, but Kofi kept beating the drum until the last of the strangers had disappeared from sight. Then he stopped, lowering the drum with a deep sense of relief. The battle was over, and the village was safe. Kofi had proven that the sacred drum was more than just an object of power, it was a symbol of unity and courage. The village elders praised Kofi for his leadership, and the villagers celebrated with dancing and singing. The sacred drum was placed in a special hut in the center of the village, where it would be protected for generations to come. Kofi's fame spread beyond Kita, and people from neighboring villages came to hear his story. They wanted to know how a young boy had defended his home with such bravery and wisdom. But Kofi always gave the same answer, it was not me alone. It was the strength of the village, the power of the sacred drum, and the wisdom of our ancestors. Years passed, and Kofi grew older. He became a respected leader in the village, just like the great warriors of old. The village of Kita continued to prosper, and the sacred drum remained at the heart of its strength. Children would often gather around the drum, running their hands over its smooth surface, wondering what it would be like to beat it. But Kofi always reminded them of the lessons he had learned on his journey. True strength does not come from the drum alone, he would say. It comes from within you, your courage, your wisdom, and your heart. And so, the legend of the sacred drum continued to be told, passed down from one generation to the next. The story of Kofi, the boy who found the drum and saved his village, became a part of the village's history. And whenever danger threatened, the villagers knew that as long as the sacred drum was with them, they would never be alone. The spirit of the drum, and the bravery of those who guarded it, would always protect them. Kofi's legacy. As the years went by, Kofi's legend grew far beyond the borders of Tafi. People from distant lands traveled to the village to see the sacred drum and hear the story of the young boy who had saved his people. Kofi, now an elder, continued to teach the younger generation the importance of unity, wisdom, and courage. He knew that the strength of a village was not in its weapons or riches, but in the hearts of its people. One day, as Kofi sat under the big baobab tree, surrounded by children eager for another tale, a little girl named Amma asked, "Grandfather Kofi, will I ever be as brave as you?" Kofi smiled warmly and replied, "Bravery isn't about fighting battles, Amma. It's about standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult. You already have the heart of a brave person, because you ask questions and seek to learn." The children listened closely, their eyes wide with wonder. They adored Kofi and admired the way he spoke of the sacred drum with such care and respect. Kofi always reminded them that the drum was not just an object of power, but a reminder of the village's values, kindness, wisdom, and the willingness to protect one another. One season, a new challenge faced the village. The climate began to change. The rains that used to come regularly now stayed away for many months. The crops began to wither, and the river that once flowed abundantly started to dry up. The people of Kita grew worried. Without water and food, how would they survive? The village elders called a meeting. "We have faced many dangers before," Nana Owusu said. "But this is different. Nature itself is turning against us." Kofi, now an old man, stood and spoke. "We must not lose hope. Just as we have always done, we will face this challenge together. The sacred drum has helped us through many hard times, and it will guide us now." But there was doubt in the air. Some villagers began to wonder if the drum still held the same power it once did. Others thought it might be time to find new solutions. One morning, Kofi woke with a new idea. "We must seek the wisdom of the mountains," he told the elders. "The mountains have stood for thousands of years. Surely, they hold the answers we seek." The elders agreed, and a small group was chosen to travel to the high mountains, where the ancient ones were said to live. Kofi, despite his old age, insisted on leading the journey. The path to the mountains was long and difficult. The group walked for many days, through dry plains and rocky terrain. Kofi's legs were not as strong as they used to be, but his spirit remained unshaken. Finally, they reached the base of the mountain. As they climbed higher, the air became thin, and the temperature dropped. Kofi could feel the weight of his years pressing on him, but he refused to turn back. At the top of the mountain, Kofi and his group found an old stone temple, hidden among the rocks. The wind howled through the cracks in the stone, and it sounded like whispers from the past. Kofi knelt before the temple and closed his eyes. "We seek your wisdom, ancient ones," he whispered to the wind. "Our village is in danger, and we need your guidance." For a moment, there was silence. Then, the wind began to speak. It was not a voice that could be heard with ears, but one that spoke to the heart. "The answer lies not in the drum, nor in the mountains. The answer lies in balance," the wind seemed to say. "You have forgotten the harmony between the land and the people. Restore that balance, and the land will heal." Kofi opened his eyes, feeling a deep sense of understanding. The message was clear: nature was not the enemy, but a part of their world that needed care and respect. Kofi and the group returned to Tafi with the wisdom of the mountains. He gathered the village once more and shared what he had learned. "We must take care of the land if we want it to take care of us," he said. "We have used the gifts of the earth without giving anything back. Now is the time to restore the balance." The villagers listened carefully. They knew Kofi's words were true. Together, they decided to plant trees, conserve water, and find ways to work with the land instead of against it. They also called on their neighbors in other villages, sharing the knowledge they had gained. Slowly, the rains returned. The crops began to grow again, and the river, though still smaller than before, started to flow once more. The people of Kita learned that by working together and respecting nature, they could overcome even the hardest challenges. Years later, Kofi, now a very old man, knew his time on earth was coming to an end. He had lived a long and fulfilling life, helping his people and protecting the sacred drum. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Kofi gathered the villagers one last time. He sat by the sacred drum and placed his hands gently on its surface. "This drum has seen many battles," he said, his voice soft but strong. "But the greatest battle is not fought with weapons. It is fought with wisdom, love, and respect for one another." Kofi closed his eyes and beat the drum one final time. The sound was soft, but it carried through the village, filling the hearts of the people with peace. And then, Kofi passed away, surrounded by his family and friends, leaving behind a legacy of courage, wisdom, and kindness. Though Kofi was gone, his spirit lived on in the hearts of the villagers. The children, now grown, told his story to their own children, and the legend of the sacred drum continued to be passed down through the generations. The drum remained in the village, a reminder of the power of unity and wisdom. But the villagers knew that the real magic was not in the drum itself, but in the lessons Kofi had taught them. And so, the village of Kita continued to thrive, with each new generation honoring the balance between the land and the people, the strength of their community, and the memory of the boy who had once set out on a journey to find the sacred drum and, in doing so, found his true strength. The story of Kofi, the sacred drum, and the people of Tafi became more than just a legend, it became a way of life, a guide for all who sought wisdom, courage, and peace.